Well, hello, everybody. My name is Mick LaSalle, and I am the author of two books about pre-code movies. And also, I wrote the introduction to the book about Joan Crawford by Peter Cowie called Joan Crawford, the Enduring Star. And so, what we're going to be doing right now is looking at the movie Rain. And I'd like to have two things happen as we watch the movie Rain. I'd like to assume, first of all, that you've seen the movie already, because this would be a weird way to watch a movie for the first time. But at the same time, I would like you to have an experience of watching the movie. So I'll be dropping in here and there dropping out here and there to let the movie breathe, commenting on specific scenes, but then also doing maybe some long digressions as well that aren't particularly responsive to what's going on the screen. So we'll have a little bit of both. Also, what I'd like you to do is to have an experience of 1932, but what this movie meant in 1932. It's fairly well known that this movie failed at the box office. It lost money. And to lose money on a Joan Crawford movie in 1932, I mean, you really have to work on that. Because Joan Crawford was one of the biggest stars in the world at that point. But I think that it failed because it didn't come out in 1930 or 1931. This is fine points between the years of lost to time, but we'll talk about that later. As you can see, this movie begins here with scenes of the rain, scenes of clouds, and see the droplets there. And it's a kind of an artistic beginning to the movie that signals to people that this is going to be consciously an art film. That this is not only an art film, but that this is a serious movie. You're watching a serious movie, so get ready for something important. That's the kind of promise that a filmmaker makes, in this case, Louis Milestone, and that the filmmaker has to deliver on. But it promises that something's going to be a little bit out of the ordinary. It also is an attempt, and I think a kind of a nicely scenic attempt, to get the movie off the stage, because this movie is based on a play, which was before that based on a short story by Somerset Maugham. The play was written by John Colton, who wrote Under Capricorn. He wrote The Shanghai Gesture. He also wrote the novel Heat that was made into a Greta Garbo movie in 1929 called Wild Orchids, which is, I think it's rather worth seeing. Anyway, the story behind this, how this happened here, because Joan Crawford's not on right now, so we can talk about other things. What happened is that John Colton read the story. He said to Somerset Maugham, he was staying in the same place as Somerset Maugham. He said, "Do you have anything good to read?" And Somerset Maugham said, "Well, yeah, you can have this." And he read it. He loved it. He said, "I want to make this into a play." And they made a handshake deal where they would, if he wrote the play and it got produced, they would split the money. And there was money to split because this thing became a sensation. This play ran 608 performances between 1922 and 1924, and was just a tremendous hit. It was the signature film, a signature role, I should say, rather, for Jean Eagles, who became with this the premier Broadway star of her time. And even years later, maybe not so much now because it's 100 years ago, but while it was still within living memory, people were talking about Jean Eagles in Rain as one of the great, great performances. By the way, when I say 1922 to 1924, that's significant because the material was truly, truly cutting edge at this time in a way that it could not be when the movie version came out 10 years later. Anyway, so to talk about this movie as a pre-code movie, I think that's kind of important to just talk about for a second about what pre-code movies are, because not everybody knows that. These are movies that were made roughly from the adoption of sound from, I'm not talking about 1927 with the jazz singer, but when sound became went wide across the industry in 1929, up to July 1st, 1934, when a rigid production code came in and basically changed movies. There was a 5-year period there between 29 and 34 where movies were relatively uncensored. And so they was able to deal honestly with some risque material, talk honestly about sexuality, also talk honestly about other things like politics, which don't really apply to this movie.
Where am I?
By the way, the face that's filling the screen that right there is that of Mary Shaw, who's a Samoan actress. And this brings up a pre-code element that probably will go right over the heads of most modern people because it's not such a big deal. But this is a rare depiction of an interracial couple. She's a woman of Pago Pago, and Guy Kibbe's an American who came to Pago Pago to have it basically to escape modern life, escape Western life, and in that scene, you saw the American military guys. You saw first of all, you saw her with her kids, her interracial, but also you saw biracial, I should say. But then you also saw her with the military guys who, completely kind of implicitly endorse this union and kind of give it the official seal of approval just implicitly. And I have to say that the relationship is treated with a lot of respect over the course of the movie, even though it's certainly not in any way central to the film. And Guy Kibbe is presented in this movie as something of a philosopher. He's a wonderful character actor principally from the 30s, although he worked up to 1950. And he's one of these guys who kind of, by virtue of their vividness, create an impression of being always the same in movie to movie. But actually, he had something of a range. He could play a complete imbecile, but then there was also kind of a harsh sort of guy, like a rough sort of guy. But he can also play a kind of thoughtful, philosophical sort of guy, which is what he plays here. Rough around the edges, but person who reads, who thinks. He's reading Nietzsche. And this is Guy Kibbe. He was just a very fine actor. He's best known, I suppose, right now for the series of musicals he made, the Busby Berkeley musicals. He didn't dance, but he's in those movies. Meanwhile, as I've been speaking, we've seen now the introduction of the missionary characters, introduction of Reverend Davidson, who's played by Walter Houston, who's a very stern figure, and we get a completely different atmosphere from that of the Horns place. By the way, Beulah Bondi, who was in this, who plays Mrs. Davidson, was only 43 years old when she made this movie, which is quite astonishing. And in a way, I think Beulah Bondi might be the best performance in this movie. And the reason why I say this is because she's the only person who, at no point in the movie do you think that she's acting. Beulah Bondi in this movie convinces you that she is who she's playing. So that, Joan Crawford, when you watch Joan Crawford in this movie, you never think that she's doing anything other than acting. And Walter Houston, who is very imposing and impressive and just, wonderful actor, he's a little bit in the same category. But Beulah Bondi really does seem like she's inhabiting this woman who's, I believe, much older and definitely she seems to embody an entire worldview and that we don't question. It's kind of like the Fredo phenomenon, I might say. Like we talk about Al Pacino in The Godfather, we talk about James Caan in The Godfather, and then we talk about Fredo in The Godfather. We talk about Fredo in The Godfather because we believe John Cazale so completely that we don't even think of him as an actor, we think of him as Fredo.
Pearls of wisdom.
All right, now we go to the most famous part of this movie. You see this in documentaries all the time. There's the hand, there's the other hand, there's the foot, there's the other foot, and there's Joan Crawford looking weird. I think that with this first appearance of Joan Crawford, we get to understand why perhaps this film wasn't the success that it might have been in 1932, despite having one of the most popular people in the world in the movie. And that is the clown-like expressionism of her appearance as Sadie Thompson. And also, for some reason, in this opening scene, she's talking in a voice in a deep voice that's really not her own, and that is reminiscent actually of, well, in an anachronistic sort of way, of Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos with this just strange, deep voice. Now, I hasten to add that she does very nice work in the movie over the course of the movie, but this first scene just is a little bit kind of hard to take, I think. This is what I find strange about it. This movie is contrasts basically the Sadie Thompson of the beginning of the movie and the Sadie Thompson of the very end of the movie with the Sadie Thompson that we get about three-quarters into the movie, where she has her conversion and comes under the wing of Reverend Davidson. And clearly, the movie is on the side of the Sadie Thompson that we meet here. And so it's just a little bit peculiar that the Sadie Thompson that the movie endorses is the Sadie Thompson that, you know, speaks in an odd, low voice and wears makeup that makes her look ridiculous.
Mrs. Horn will take care of you.
Well, here's Bubbles.
By the way, now we go back to shots of the rain, and with the soundtrack also sounding like something out of Italian neorealism, maybe 15 years earlier, 15 years, in advance. Of course, Italian neorealism and this movie have nothing to do with each other, but the music here and is serving kind of the nature of the music is serving the same kind of purpose. It's suggesting people who are struggling with universal problems and suggesting that there will be fateful occurrences in their lives over the course of the movie. It's just very, very nice black and white footage of natural stuff, the sun, the clouds, quite lovely.
Everybody being made to behave.
Yes, we live in the day of the new commandment. Thou shalt not enjoy thyself.
I saw it coming 20 years ago. That's why I left Chicago. I wanted peace. Gad, I found it too.
To get back to Sadie Thompson, basically Sadie Thompson and her two incarnations of the course of this movie, it's basically, this is a film about the difference between instinct and impulse versus repression. And it's very much, you could say, it's post-Freudian. The 1920s, in terms of popular thought, one of the big strains of popular thought was the discovery and the popularization of Sigmund Freud's ideas. Now, when I say his ideas, I'm not saying that everybody was reading Freud, but I'm saying that people were getting an idea of what was in Sigmund Freud's writing, and it was a pretty simplified idea. But the idea was basically that repression was bad and that instinct was good. And we find that all throughout the 20s, like even in songs like Find Me a Primitive Man by Cole Porter, or the attraction of men who are thought of as being primitive, and like Valentino or something that you get in the early and mid-20s. And the idea was that repression is inevitably doesn't work, and it's kind of anti-life and anti-natural. And it leads to bad things. It basically makes people explode. This it can be evidenced also, like in just the contrast between the two Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movies, one that was made in 1920 with John Barrymore, and another was made in 1931 with Frederick March. You have two movies based on the same story, same. I mean, everything. It should be the same story, but it's not, because they have opposite points. Same actions, but they mean different things. The 1920 movie is explicitly says, in fact, states it in like an opening crawl, that this is the movie about a man who gave in to impulse, and as a result horrible things happen. The 1931 film has exactly the opposite point. It's saying that every bad thing that happened here is a consequence of him trying to repress something that should not be repressed. In this case, it's his sexual impulse. He's being forced in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1931 not to get married. When he wants to get married, he's been forced to wait a year. And as a result, when he takes the potion, it turns him into, makes him sex crazed and leads to all horrible things. You see here Sadie Thompson with these soldiers and just hanging around, and she's raising the bottle, and and there's Guy Kibbe offering the corkscrew, and it's like these are the people who are life, who are representing life, and kind of a realistic and healthy understanding of what life is. This is fairly new as an idea, though by the time you get to 1932, October of 1932, when this came out, it's kind of old as a new idea. By the way, here you see the record being put on the phonograph. I should say that the use of music in the movie is a little bit different than the use of music in the play. It was understood in the play. Of course, you could do things on stage that you can't do in a movie, or before a New York audience and Broadway, as opposed to something that's going out to the rest of the country. When the music was playing, she was having sex. The idea was that you have this woman who's an active prostitute living in a house temporarily with these very straight-laced religious characters, and she's not taking the week off. She is plying her trade there, and when the music is playing, it's to cover up the sounds of people having sex. In the movie, of course, you can't show that. In the play, you can't show it either, but you could suggest it. But in the movie, what they do is they make it rather innocent. I mean, the guys are being forward, you might say, in an old-fashioned word, but it's not. She's not having sex with anybody, and I think that makes her a little bit more not sympathetic, but it makes what happens to her just seem all the more unfair, because even because we see what she's doing, she's not really doing anything, so she's getting punished for really like absolutely nothing. It's probably a good idea to discuss for a bit. I'll keep an eye on the movie to see if there's anything that needs to be lifted out, but to just discuss for a bit the role of the prostitute in pre-code movies. Pre-code movies were very big on prostitutes, just as they were very big on gangsters. In both cases, in the early part of the pre-code cycle. 1930, 1931. And around this time, and some of 1932, just about every actress of any consequence played a prostitute, including ones you wouldn't necessarily think. Myrna Loy in Penthouse, Helen Hayes in The Sin of Madeleine Claudet. She even won an Oscar for it. But Greta Garbo, everybody, really everybody except for Anne Harding and Norma Shearer. And Norma Shearer played a kept woman in The Trial of Mary Dugan, which is not quite the same, but is in the same, what you might say, moral universe. The movie Prostitute is something kind of distinct from actual prostitution, because the movies have never really been all that interested in presenting prostitution in a realistic way, even up to modern times. The prostitutes tend to be kind of sentimental figures. The example of Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver is an example of something the other way, of something realistic and pretty awful. And it's also interesting that we get the flourishing of the prostitute in 1929, 30, 31, 32, at a point in history where prostitution itself in American life was on the wane. You know, in the 19th century, this is like, I mean, this is horrible to contemplate. I can't even imagine such a thing, but it was very common for boys' first sexual experiences to be with a prostitute. And married men very often continued to go to brothels as they were married. And there were a lot of brothels in the major cities in, let's say, the 1890s, the turn of the century. And but by the time you get to, you know, let's say 1925, it's no longer, prostitution's no longer part of the life of of uh, of men, or most men, and there were fewer women acting as prostitutes, and most of the sex that was happening instead between men and women were happening. I'm sorry, and unmarried men and women were happening between boyfriends and girlfriends, because it became common in the 1920s, common and rather acceptable for people to have sex once they were engaged. All right, by the way, I want to interrupt myself right here. Take a look at this this moment, these exchange of glances between Joan Crawford and Walter Houston here. I mean, he looks at her in such a way, such a stern way, and you see that her confidence, her almost her self-image is actually rather vulnerable to him. And that's going to become important as the movie goes on. And you see here he's realizing that he's absolutely must do something about this terrible woman who's there.
What's he belay?
The plague spot of Honolulu.
That long-haired guy in there just gave me the filthiest look.
It's kind of a magnificent portrait of a man who's just not, who doesn't know himself. He knows everything, but he doesn't know himself. Anyway, when we find out that there were, you know, just all these women playing prostitutes in movies, it seems suspicious. I mean, it seems like, oh, well, this is, I get it. This is, you know, the prostitute's sort of like an ideal victim for, out of the, maybe a kind of misogynistic need to be titillated and also exercise judgment. That this is basically a figure, the movie prostitute would be a figure rooted in misogyny. But it's not when you see the movies. Did you see that, this kind of thing, you know, that kind of schizophrenic need for titillation and judgment in the films in the 1950s, in the treatment, the very condescending treatment, let's say, that Marilyn Monroe gets in almost every movie she ever made, until maybe a few movies near the end. But if you look at the films of the early 30s, this is not the case. Dietrich played prostitutes in several of her early films. Anna Mae Wong, Carole Lombard, Dorothy McHale, Kay Francis, and in every one of these movies, the woman was strong and appealing, and the movie was invariably on the woman's side, always. The point here is not to suggest that like every appearance of a movie prostitute in the early 30s was some wonderful occasion for some kind of enlightened pronouncement. I mean, you get movies like Call Her Savage at the very lewd studio Fox, the Clara Bow movie from 1932, where it's just kind of prurient. And then you also get sensational entries like Barbara Stanwyck in Babyface, which is a rather wonderful movie, but I wouldn't, and is on the woman's side, but is still a little bit almost so outlandish as to be absurd. But it is in the actual experience of watching these movies, it's very clear that these are movies that are on the woman's side. And very much in the case also with Rain. These prostitute movies are guided by a single idea. And it's, you know, it's an idea that's disguised by a lot of melodrama, and it's disguised by the circumstances of plot and the big emotions and the clutter of the story and all those things. But it's that goodness and chastity are no longer synonymous, and that celibacy is not the same as virtue, so that virginity doesn't matter anymore. That's the idea. And, we can smile at that and think it seems old-fashioned, but that is a very big moment because, well, first of all, virginity is going to come back in a big way once censorship comes in July 1st, 1934. But if you just look at how, what was called a woman's virtue was basically used as a club to hit women over the head for who knows how many thousands of years, the idea of that virtue and virginity are no longer synonymous is actually a very big concept. And so the prostitute movies are a way of getting to that realization. Basically, the prostitute movies were a way of getting at what was going on with modern women, but with the excuse of pretending to be telling stories from society's fringes. Okay? So, there were real changes over the course of the 20s, real things that happened. Women were going to colleges. Women were getting jobs. They were moving into the city. Women were smoking and wearing makeup. These are two things that only prostitutes and bohemians did, like in 1918. But by the time you get to 1926, 27, it's pretty commonplace. By the time you get to Sadie Thompson, it's very commonplace. The idea of women smoking and wearing makeup was not a big deal in 1932, but it was within fresh memory of its being a big deal in 1922. And so, there were real changes with women with regard to sexuality. Women were about 75% of the women who were born between 1890 and 1900 were virgins when they got married. About 25% of the women who were born between 1910 and 1920 were virgins when they got married. So things were really changing with regard to sexual mores. That's what was going on. It was really telling stories of women. And the reason why the prostitute movies faded out is because they were no longer needed. Because suddenly you can start telling stories about real women. Basically, the prostitute movies are a way of feeling out the audience. It's a way of saying, okay, we're going to show this story, we're going to approve this woman, and will the audience go for it? And of course, the audience went for it every single time. The audience was with the women. But by the time you get to October 1932, when Rain was made, it's pretty late in the cycle, and you no longer need the movie Prostitute because you can, see the kind of a cutting-edge morality portrayed in a movie starring Anne Harding in Animal Kingdom, or a whole host of all these wonderful movies that were made at this time. So this is late in the cycle, and I think the last flourishing you get is Jean Harlow in Red Dust about 10 days later. I mentioned earlier that Joan Crawford was a huge star. She's part of the Mount Rushmore at MGM that included Shearer, Garbo, and Harlow. And she became a big star with a movie in 1928 called Our Dancing Daughters. So she was a silent film star, and she was known as the embodiment of youth and freshness and loveliness. And then she changed her image a bit and kind of broadened her image with a movie called Possessed in 1931, which was a real advance for her and where she really connected with her audience. And she played a young woman from a box factory who works at a box factory, who goes to New York and becomes the kept woman of a big businessman who happens to be Clark Gable, so did okay. There was something, though, about her. She was not the most pre-code of the pre-code actresses. The Shearer movies, the Harlow movies, for sure, were definitely more risque. And I think it was probably because there was something kind of harsh about Crawford in her essence, so that it made her want to play the soft side. Now, that kind of apologetic quality, you can argue, is a virtue in her performance here, because she does, succumb to Davidson And she does seem to have some guilt and does seem to she's not she's not buoyant. She's not buoyant like Gloria Swanson was in the 1928 movie Sadie Thompson. She seems to be down on herself walking through the door. In a way, it makes sense of where the movie goes, but in a way, it kind of robs her performance a little bit of some surprise.
That's so, Miss Thompson.
I mean, in a sense, there would be two ways of playing it. She could play somebody who is extremely confident, and then just suddenly this guy just flips a switch in her head, and rather than somebody who is kind of a little bit diffident and a little bit apologetic coming through the door. I think the other way might have been more interesting, but I don't know. It's hard to really complain.
Oh, it's foolish, I know. But it's the first time I've ever had words with a woman of that sort. Well, there's one comfort. We shan't have to suffer this sort of thing much longer. Mr. Davidson is attending to that.
Hello, Davidson.
Alfred, please change your wet clothes.
No, I shall be going out again, probably.
Again? Oh, Alfred, you must try to get a little rest. Alfred, you must.
My wife, like Martha, thou hast troubled thyself about many things, but mostly about me. I do not know what I should ever have done without my dear wife. In the early days of our island work, it was she who gave me the strength and courage to go on.
Alfred, just before you got back, that girl spoke to me. She jeered and screamed at us. What are you going to do about her?
Dinner ready, by and by.
Strange how one's thoughts run to food when there's nothing else to think of.
As it happens, there is a great deal to think of. This Thompson woman, you say, spoke to you?
Yes, she thrust herself in upon us with no insult.
The governor tells me the affair is no concern of his. But if I find her incorrigible, I shall see to it that he acts. I'm afraid he has no backbone.
I suppose that means he won't do exactly as you want, whatever it is you want him to do.
I only want him to do what is right.
There may be differences of opinion as to what is right.
If a man had a gangrenous foot, would you have patience with anyone who hesitates to cut it off?
Gangrene is a matter of fact.
And is not evil?
To me, it has always seemed a matter of opinion. Anyway, the poor thing will only be here until the boat for Apia goes.
And after she gets to Apia?
I can't see how that concerns us.
That's where you and I differ, Doctor. I think it would be best if I spoke to her.
But Alfred, why do you see her?
I cannot act until I have given her every chance.
She'll only insult you.
Let her insult me. Let her spit on me. She has an immortal soul, and I must do all in my power to save it.
Now there's Crawford and Walter Houston talking between the beads. Let's listen to them for a bit.
Well, I guess this supper can stand by if it's important.
By the way, her hair in this movie is straight out of Greta Garbo in Inspiration from 1931. They used to borrow from each other.
Miss Thompson, I have come to make you a gift, the most precious gift that life can offer.
You want to give me something?
Yes, I want to give you something.
I guess I'm not following you.
The gift I offer is free.
I don't know why I get all this attention from you, Mr. Davidson. I guess you mean well, but I think I can worry along as I've been worrying along for these several years.
When I watch this scene, I get the sense that Louis Milestone really didn't give his actors much guidance, or if he gave them guidance, it wasn't particularly detailed.
Always make out one way or another.
Walter Houston,
Mr. Davidson, I'll go on eating. I'm hungry.
You are hungry for the bread of the Spirit.
Walter Houston is playing,
Eternal life.
what's this?
You mean right by me, Mr. Davidson, and I'm grateful.
Walter Houston, the actor, knows where Davidson is heading.
Just between ourselves,
So the question is,
I had a feeling
how does he end up there? How does Walter Houston make that journey for Davidson?
I've been wanting to apologize.
Because eventually, Walter Houston becomes physically attracted to Sadie. He acts on it. can't stand living with himself and kills himself.
This is all beside the point, Miss Thompson.
But the way he has Houston play this, he's almost like some kind of monolith, like some kind of, he just is completely implacable. And it's a bit of a kind with some of his other performances. You know, he's best known today for for reasons of the great popularity of the film. He's best known today for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where he plays the old prospector. But that movie, he was completely different than he was in like every other movie. And the movies that he's best known for are movies in this period, movies like Beast of the City or Congo, or most wonderfully Gabriel over the White House, where he played a very kind of rigid kind of guy in movie after movie. But here, I think that because of where Davidson ends up, you just get the feeling that there should be some sense that something is in the balance. Instead, the way they do, they every scene, he's more or less a jackhammer, and she's just the pavement getting, pummeled and ground up, beat up, and broken up. It makes me wonder about the stage production in 1922. Of course, the things we can't see, take on they become great. But it's so acclaimed. Gene Eagles was so noticed that I wonder how they played this, how they overcame the sameness of the scenes. Him beating on her and she, fighting, but not really that well. I suppose it went one of two ways. I mean, either they just found some nuance in it, or they found ways to make that action of him attacking and her breaking up get a little bit more interesting. Perhaps a clue to what it was like could be found in the one talkie that survives of Gene Eagles. It's a movie called The Letter, in 1929. Betty Davis remade it later on. Not as good as Gene Eagles. Gene Eagles is absolutely extraordinary in this. And in the movie, she's playing a woman who's just falling apart. And at times you watch Gene Eagles and it looks like you're watching somebody absolutely come apart at the seams. It's just incredible. And of course, in a way, she was coming apart because she died of a drug overdose about 6 months after the letter came out. But it's possible that Gene Eagles had just the talent to make falling apart just be incredibly interesting. In the case of Joan Crawford, I think she's a little less interesting because she doesn't seem like she's falling apart. She really just seems like she's feeling bad. And when you get to the section of the movie where she's actually falling apart, you don't really believe it. It just seems theatrical. Anyway, let's take a look, see some more of this scene.
I'll admit you've got me stalled. What are you driving at? What have I to atone for?
Your life.
Mr. Davidson, why do you worry about me?
You have had your own soul and trust, and you have failed.
See this shot of him, a scene from her point of view, shot from the ground practically, and her and him in the light, just rigid. It's kind of nice, kind of obvious, but sometimes the obvious is still good.
Which find no place for evil.
And you? What are you gonna do?
Only my duty.
Yeah, I know. You went to see the governor about me, didn't you?
All right, Miss Thompson, I have been to see the governor.
So all you said just now about letting bygones be bygones, calling quits on that bust-up we had was just a bluff.
Be silent. Are you ready to put away your sins, to live a righteous and decent life, to pray for forgiveness? If you are not, be it on your own head.
Hey!
I shall not let you go to appear, Sadie Thompson. You are an evil woman. You have lived an evil life, and you have come here to carry your infamy to other places.
You're a liar. Who do you think you are standing there calling me names?
Do you deny that you have escaped from evil A?
I've listened to you all I'm gonna listen to you. Now you listen to me. You just told me I'd better be careful. Well, you'd better be careful yourself. Lay off me or I'll show you what it means when I start to get mad. It'll be worse for you if you don't.
The devil in you is strong, my poor Sadie Thompson. Evil has claimed you as its own.
You take care of your own evil and I'll take care of mine. I know what you want. You want another scalp. Well, you don't get mine. You don't fool me. You want to make me over your way, do you? Well, you just try it.
This is your last chance, Sadie Thompson. Kneel with me and pray.
Let go of me.
Sadie Thompson, you are doomed.
Ah, you make me laugh.
In a way, I think that might be the best scene in the movie. The reason I say this is because it seems the most authentic. It's the most authentic in terms of him, and it's the most authentic in terms of her. He is still strong. He is and authentically strong. We believe in his strength. Because at this stage, maybe he wouldn't be as attracted to her. He wouldn't be so far down the line in terms of attraction that he's on the edge of falling apart. In other words, the implacability of Walter Houston's performance isn't really a problem yet, because at that stage he would possibly be the way he is. And Sadie Thompson is still trying to be ingratiating, but is still strong. And the scene sets up the differences between the two of them in terms of personality, but also philosophy. He is clearly to us a huge phony. I mean, there's just no question that this guy is just a phony. He's the worst kind of phony. He's somebody who isn't even onto himself. He's so deeply, deeply phony that he's unreachable. He can't be found. He is the truly lost person here. And he's also a bully. When she says, you just want another scalp, that is what he wants. He's a bully who uses, basically puts himself in the place of God. And every time it's something that displeases him, it's displeasing God, or pleases him, pleases God. As the movie progresses, then the characters make journeys that I am not all that sure that the performances completely support, although they support them to a degree.
Listen to it. Don't it make you want to scream? When you do scream, what good does it do you? You haven't any strength left. You're hopeless, miserable.
Don't talk like that, Miss Sadie. Don't sound like it.
Oh, forget it. I'll get the phantoms, I guess. I'll get over them. You see, I just had a run-in with that Davidson.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What about?
He's not going to let me go to a pier, so he says. And anyone can see with two glass eyes that this side of the equator, he's in right and I'm in wrong. The only thing I can't figure out is what devil's trick he'll use to stop me.
I don't see what he can do.
Yeah, neither do I. But we don't say it with bells, either of us. You know, there's something about that old crow that isn't human. He's deep, creepy.
There's something about that old crow that isn't human. He's deep and he's creepy. Now, that's something that the movie attempts to support throughout, that maybe there's something almost, not supernatural, but otherworldly about Davidson. At one point, someone calls him a witch doctor. Amina calls him a witch doctor. And he also does seem to have some kind of intuition. There's a point in the movie, late in the movie, that you'll see where he just gets some kind of intuition that Sadie is being made vulnerable, coming out of his clutches. And so he returns back to Pago Pago and finds that Handsome is there. And he's about to take her away, or at least Davidson thinks he is, and at least Handsome thinks he's about to. Doesn't seem like that's really going to happen. But I wonder if perhaps this idea, this otherworldly quality, this deep and creepy quality, was given a signal, and too much of a signal perhaps, for the performance of Walter Houston, because that's certainly what he's playing. He's playing somebody who is deep and creepy and a little bit unnatural in his affect. But I do wonder if that was a case of maybe taking a misperception on the part of another character and then building a performance out of it. Obviously, he has to seem deep and creepy enough to give other people the impression that he's deep and creepy. But one wonders if that should be the final note. And I think it
Grease spot of the world, they say.
it's it seems to define the limits of how Walter Houston has chosen to play this role.
There's a boat twice a month. I'm headed that way just as soon as I shed these hash marks.
Yeah?
That'll be a month and 3 days.
What are you going to do there, Hanson?
Going in the building business. Old shipmate of mine has a place and wants a partner. These 3 years Lefty's been at me to get my discharge and come in with him. You'd like Lefty. Me and him joined the service same time 12 years ago.
Oh, I'm glad you're fixed, Hanson. You ought to do fine.
You know, 2 times Lefty and me joined over. When it comes to number 3, Nick, says he. Guess what I'm going to do, says Lefty. Well, I knew without guessing. So I stood up with him and the bride, and they shoved off for Sydney, me throwing the rice.
I bet you'll be glad to see him.
If you should go to Sydney, Lefty and Maggie have put you wise what to do.
Yeah, can't I just hear Lefty's wife yelping with joy at the sight of me?
You haven't any cause to worry about Maggie. You two would get along swell.
Baby boy, I know females. You don't.
I got an idea what's on your mind. But Maggie ain't the kind of a dame you're meaning. She's square from the toes up. Funny thing, them that kick highest always seem to settle down hardest.
That's a very famous line that you hear in other pre-code movies at the time. Them that kick highest always settle down hardest. And then later he says, knowing the worst to begin with isn't the worst way to begin. That's definitely a little bit of a new idea. And it's what we were talking about earlier, about virginity and virtue are not synonymous, and that things are different. And this man is basically, these 2 men have married prostitutes and saying, no big deal. That's really the idea of the movie.
Not that that might mean so much to you, maybe.
I haven't so many friends, Hanson, but what I could do with one more. You know, you're an awful funny fella, Hanson.
I guess I'm the dumbbell king, all right.
Is there any kid,
Who?
those friends of yours in Sydney?
Oh, I was thinking of something else. Yep, 2. How about it?
Huh? How about what?
Changing your route and going to Sydney instead.
Sure. Why not? I guess no one can stop me from doing that. What a simp I was getting a wind up all over nothing. Here I was jumping with the shakes and nervous as a witch because that dismal plum wouldn't let me go to a pier. Well, a pier my foot. It's Sydney for mine.
So basically, the movie could be over at this point. She's going to go to Sydney with this guy. She's probably going to settle down with this guy, but then the letter arrives. And it's the letter that's going to say that because of Davidson's influence, Sadie Thompson not only has to leave, but she has to leave on the first boat to San Francisco, which is, of course, we know, having seen the movie already, terrifying to her because as soon as she gets there, she's going to go to jail. And interestingly, she's going to go to jail for something she did not do. And so we get this big confrontation scene coming up between her and Walter Houston. By the way, we'll get into this later a bit, but the character of Hanson does not exist in the short story. He's a creation of John Colton in the play.
So, you're back, are you? You low-down skunk. What have you been telling the governor about me?
I've been hoping to have another talk with you, Miss Thompson.
Why, you miserable snail snatcher. I wouldn't talk to you if you and me were the only 2 people left on earth. Why, you're so doggone mean it makes me sick even to look at you. That's what I think of you. Coming to me with all that guff you spilled about salvation. Then going and having me deported on top of it. Why, you low-lived...
Sadie!
I'm wholly indifferent to the abuse you think fit to heap upon me.
Still in the
I'm wholly indifferent to the abuse. He's not indifferent. He's quite the opposite.
It hardly expecting to let you stay under the circumstances.
Yeah, well, what did the governor know or care about me? You went and hauled your hooks into me. It's you that did it. You did it all.
I don't want to deceive you, Miss Thompson. I urge the governor to take the only steps consistent with his obligation.
Well, why couldn't you let me be? Was I doing you any harm?
You may rest assured if you had been, I would be the last one to resent it.
You don't think I want to stay in this rain hole, do you?
You are being given every opportunity of getting out.
Come on, Sadie, don't say any more.
You, I know you're kind. You dirty two-faced mutt. I bet when you were a kid you caught flies and tore their wings off. I bet you stuck pins in frogs just to see them wiggle and flap while you read them a lecture. I know you. Why, you'd tear the heart out of your grandmother if she didn't think your way and tell her you were saving her soul, you something in front of her.
You will be glad to hear that the governor has acted at last. He's a weak man. For days he has shilly-shallied, saying it was none of his concern.
I can readily see why. How did you convince him?
Interestingly, one of the things that she says when she's talking to Davidson is that she says that it's that he told filthy lies about her. So that's the movie is kind of persisting and trying to have it both ways, despite being pre-code. Is that he says she really is a prostitute. There's no doubt about it, and at the same time, whatever he's saying is a lie. But what is he saying? That's not a lie.
Mrs. Davidson tells me she hasn't closed her eyes ever since that girl came to live under the same roof as her.
This is Kendall Lee.
Don't joke about such things. Please, Robert.
Kendall Lee plays the wife of Robert McPhail there, and it's probably one of the worst performances you can possibly see. She didn't even come close to making it. She only made 4 films, and that was it.
Sorry you're not feeling well.
I'm well enough. Not really sick. O'Hara said that just because I had to see you.
Yes, Miss Thompson.
I gotta get back for inspection now. I'll see you later. Keep your chin up.
Thanks, Hanson.
Lucky meeting, Sarge.
So now we're about to have a meeting between the doctor, McPhail, played by Matt Moore, who was kind of a star in the 20s, in the silent days, and Sadie Thompson. It's kind of a meeting of the secular world, if you want to put more importance on it. He's, by virtue of being a doctor, something of a man of science, somebody who's just intimately aware of the limitations of being human and the nature of being human. And of course, she deals in the physical as well in another way. This is typical of something adapted from the stage. He goes up the stairs and Walter Houston enters because rather than to go into the room where Walter Houston is, because it's basically keeping its roots in the stage tradition. This is probably how I'm sure I know this is how the scene was on the stage.
It's only a matter of a few days.
Well, you mean this interference for the best, but my mind is made up.
If you want to know what I think you're harsh and tyrannical.
I'm terribly sorry you should think that of me, Doctor. Believe me, my heart bleeds for that unfortunate young woman. But I cannot find it in my conscience to change my decision. However, if the governor wishes to do so on his own account, that is his business.
He won't. And you know why.
Please don't bear any malice toward me because I cannot accede to your wish. I respect you very much, Dr. McPhail, and I should be sorry indeed if you thought ill of me.
I have no doubt you have a sufficiently good opinion of yourself to bear mine with equanimity.
That smile as he goes up the stairs, it's rather interesting. And that exchange with the doctor, it's the only place where I almost feel that Davidson his facade is beginning to crack. You know, to act the way he does with Sadie, who's kind of a damaged person and not particularly, certainly not educated, bright, but not really smart in the ways of smart people. It's easy to maintain his act, maybe to himself as well. But here he's talking to a fellow educated man, He's talking to a man in an age where that mattered. And so he's essentially talking to an equal. And when he's saying things like it would sadden me very much if you were to think ill of me, it doesn't. It seems like he's being sarcastic. And even when he says that poor child and all this stuff, it seems like he's playing it down the middle. Wants to be taken seriously, but also wants to flaunt his power. In other words, like saying, yeah, I'm being phony, and that's okay because I'm going to get away with it. But it's just the only moment where you can think maybe Davidson doesn't believe his own spiel, as it were. Then you have this nice scene here with Amina.
What'd she say?
What were you saying, Amina?
All the same, I know. He big or too.
A witch doctor, a species of wizard, you perceive. Knew everything, saw everything. Lived by the power of thought. A grilled goat chop had no charms for him. When hungry, he simply ferreted out a devil and ate him up for tea.
Oh, cut it. That kind of talk gives me the willies. Let me have a drink, will you, Joe?
And so you get this scene where she's with really the two normal people who have no power at all and seem to have some kind of insight into both cultures and seem to know the ways of the world in some ways. And she's out there listening to Davidson praying in this ostentatious way, almost like an act of aggression and an act of self-assertion, not really an act of reverence. Doing it, I think, to drive her crazy and to also rub in the faces of everybody, because at this point he has everybody against him. He has the doctor, Davidson has the doctor against him. Doesn't have the doctor's wife against him, but that's only because Kendall Lee really can't act, so she doesn't know what she's doing in the performance. He has Guy Kibbe and his wife, Horn and his wife, Amina, against him. And so that praying in the night is really kind of a way, it's not really reverence, it's just rubbing everybody's face in his power. This moment of Joan Crawford alone, you kind of get the star power of Joan Crawford, just the power of stardom in that. Now she walks in, talks to him on the stairway. Another famous scene.
I'm sorry for what I said to you today. For everything that's happened, I ask pardon.
I guess my back is broad enough to bear a few hard words.
I guess my back is broad enough to bear a few hard words. It's just consistent with everything they've written. One of the most effective things in the writing of this role is that everything he says about how he can withstand other people saying bad things about him, and he doesn't care what anybody thinks, and he'd just be happy to bear all these burdens to save people. And it's maddening. You want to smack the guy. But it's just so typical. I mean, it's so emblematic of a certain kind of hypocrite.
Well, it's this way. I'm trying to go straight now, and if I go back there, I can't go straight.
What will prevent you from going straight if you really want to?
You notice they're staying on this shot for a while because they're trying to build up the tension for the close-up that they want to bring in.
I'm scared he'll get me again.
Who is this man?
Sort of a politician.
I see. And you fear his influence, eh?
Yeah, that's it. You see, he's bad, and I'm scared of him.
Does he need to know that you have returned?
He'll know.
Oh, but Miss Thompson, San Francisco is a big place. It should not be difficult for you to keep out of his way if you want to.
Well, I'll have to get help once I get back, and the only people that'll help me are in with him.
If you earnestly desire to go straight, it will not be necessary for you to go to your former friends for help. My foundation will help you until you are on your feet. This man you fear need never know you are in the city.
One wonders about Davidson's foundation. You get the feeling that it's worldwide. There we go, the close-up, and then the close-up.
Come, Miss Thompson. These evasions are getting you nowhere. Why are you afraid to return to San Francisco?
I told you, because they can't go straight there.
Shall I tell you why you're afraid to go back? This politician you fear is a politician in a uniform. He wears a badge. What you fear is the penitentiary.
Oh, don't send me back, please. I'll be good. Honest, I will.
Is that it, the penitentiary?
But I was framed. I got away before they caught me. Gee, they'll nab me the minute I get off that boat. It'll be 3 years for mine. 3 years. Oh, give me a chance, will you? Just one chance.
I'm going to give you the finest chance you've ever had.
I don't have to go back, you mean?
Yes, you will have to go back. You will sail for San Francisco Tuesday, as the governor has ordered. If you are truly repentant, you will accept this punishment. You will
This is the key scene in the movie, and
call me. I will come. At any hour
I wonder about it.
you need me, I will come. I shall be waiting for your call.
Now this, here we go.
Mr. Davidson, wait a minute. You're right, Mr. Davidson. I am bad, but I want to be good, only I don't know how. So, I'll tell you what. You let me stay here with you, and then you can tell me what to do. And no matter what it is, I'll do it for you.
Can't stay here. You've got to go back. You've got to serve your time.
You mean to say, if I repent and want to be good, I still have to go to the penitentiary?
Yes, you've got to go.
All right. You send me back there, and that's my finish.
No, it will be your beginning.
But I was framed, I tell you.
Innocent or guilty, you have got to serve your sentence. It's the only way you can prove you are worthy of mercy.
That's sick. Innocent or guilty, you have to serve your sentence.
What are you talking about? Where's your mercy? Oh, no. I guess that repentant stuff is off.
Was it ever on, Miss Thompson?
Whether it was or not, it's off now.
You've got to go back to San Francisco.
Straight orders from your private heaven, huh? Oh, no, Mr. Davidson. Your God and me could never be shipmates. And the next time you talk to him, you can tell him this for me, that Sadie Thompson is on her way to hell.
Stop.
That's a big moment. Sadie Thompson's on her way to hell. Here, listen to this.
You've been telling me what's wrong with me. Now I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. You keep yelling at me to be punished, to go back and suffer. How do you know what I've suffered? You don't know, you don't care, and you don't even ask, and you call yourself a Christian.
Our
Well, you're
Father
nothing
who
but a
art in
miserable
heaven,
witch burner,
hallowed
that's
be
what you
thy
are.
name.
Miserable witch burner. Perfect.
You know you're big and you know you're strong and got the
Interesting. Now, this moment is,
but I've got the power to stand here
why does he start praying?
and be damned to you.
He starts praying because because she's starting to make sense. And so he starts praying as a way to just cover up what she's saying and make her feel like it can't penetrate. F. Scott Fitzgerald, when he talked about writing for Joan Crawford, he said it was impossible to write for Joan Crawford because to get her to do a simple transition from one mood into something even close to the same mood, it would require kind of a Jekyll and Hyde transformation. In this, she goes from defiant, and now she's going to be like entranced. And the question is, why would this work on her? This is the thing that's hardest about this story now, is making you believe that this would work on her. I would say that for the person playing Sadie Thompson, anybody who's ever played Sadie Thompson, anybody who ever will play Sadie Thompson, this is the triple axel. You have to make this believable. And for our purposes, of course, we're rooting for the movie. And so we don't necessarily believe it, but we're willing to believe it. But for this movie and for productions of this to fire on all cylinders, what really is required is for Sadie Thompson to be building that towards that triple axel from her first appearance in the movie, making you believe that, because that's everything. I mean, that's, first of all, the next half hour, and that is the nature of the betrayal that Davidson commits against Sadie by doing something physical. We don't know exactly what he does, but by doing something towards her in a sexual way. Look at this, we have the guys playing the drums, and I mean, this moment of Sadie's conversion, or at least capitulation, is is dramatic because, and it's like it's supported by the elements and the drumming and everything. It's made important in the filmmaking, and so it has to deliver. And I have to say that here it gets maybe a passing grade, but it doesn't. It's not moving. For likewise for Davidson, the triple axel that he has to do, which is in some ways harder because it's less supported by the script, is the one where he becomes overwhelmed by sexual desire. Because that, I would think, has to be building in some way from the beginning of when we see him. One of the surprising things about this movie is when Davidson first sets eyes on Sadie Thompson, nothing is made of it. Now, I imagine that nothing was made of it in the 1922 stage production, or else something would have made its way into the script in 1932. But given that this is a movie, that was an opportunity for some kind of moment when he sees her. And that wasn't exploited. But I would say that that would be something that would be it would be a good thing to build into the movie just as a way of supporting Davidson. Now you see Davidson here. He is getting an intuition that something is wrong with Sadie and he has to go back. I find it rather extraordinary that Davidson is there watching a drumming exhibition in the rain. Don't think that he'd be much into the native music of the people there, but just to get him out of there. And now we see David Gargan is handsome there with Guy Kibbe about to have a drink. And this is where we find out that Sadie has had a very rough few days and that she has had something of a transformation. The transformation, as we will see, will be physical as well.
Time to think about you or anything else. With Davidson getting her ready to go back to San Francisco.
What's he been doing to her?
Praying.
Praying?
Praying.
Got a beach with his some stuff, huh?
Beached and delirious, I'd say.
He took pretty good care to get rid of me before he started, didn't he? Well, I'll beat him to it tonight.
How did you get out?
Walked out.
What's a doing, O'Hara? You aroused my curiosity.
If I was you, I'd ease off to bed with the old lady and not have any curiosity.
Oh, you would you? And why would you do that?
I'd do that so as I wouldn't be blamed for anything in case anything happened.
Sounds like another row starting. The most unlucky day of my life, the day that Orduna came into port. Amina, lock up. I like my comfort. For 5 days now, this whole household is centered on that tormented Thompson girl in there. With Davidson and old Nick wrestling for her soul. It's got me nervous.
He says Davidson and old Nick, the devil, wrestling for his soul. But of course, in the context of this movie, Davidson and old Nick are just about the same thing.
The last vestige of mortal sin lurking in that poor critter's heart has been torn out. Sadie Thompson, who blew into my hotel a week ago, isn't anymore. Wait till you see her.
He says the Sadie Thompson that came into his hotel is not the same as the one before, that she's no more. So this is just a tremendous buildup for what has to happen now. I mean, it's such pressure on an actress to deliver. Joan Crawford was just not at that level, unfortunately. People talk about how, people like in a revisionist sort of way, oh, here he is, going on the canoe, kind of like Miss Gulch in The Wizard of Oz. Okay, here comes the big reveal now, the second big reveal of Crawford. And there she is.
You look awful sick.
I was wondering whether I'd see you before I left. You've been awful kind.
He says that she looks awful sick. And of course, as it's often the case in movies, when somebody says, you look terrible, they look great. They almost always do. But look, this is, to me, just such a strange thing. And I alluded to this earlier. This is Joan Crawford. This is what Joan Crawford looked like in 1932. This is what Joan Crawford looked like in every Joan Crawford movie that was made in the early 30s. She looks fantastic. She looks great. And this is supposed to be her at her absolute worst. And her at her best is supposed to be her as Sadie Thompson, where she's made up to look like Bozo. It's very peculiar style choices here.
You're not going to San Francisco, that's what's happened. You're leaving here in a few minutes for the Samarkand Islands on a junk. You're to wait there until the Sydney boat comes along, then you're going to Sydney.
But what do you suppose Mr. Davidson would say if he came back and found me gone?
You know the old shouter better than I do. But I don't mind admitting that the sight of his face at that moment had slipped me considerable quiet fun. You've had a pretty bad time these last few days, I guess. Just forget him.
It's mighty sweet and fine of you to go to all this trouble for me.
Fine, nothing. This ain't one small bit of what I'd like to do for you if I got the chance.
You know, you're doing this sort of makes me want to cry. But
what?
I can't do it.
Why can't you do it?
For a movie that has some real visual grace in many places, this scene, which is really rather important, the three-person encounter between Davidson, Sadie, and Handsome, is pretty static. I mean, you see, they're just sitting there for a long time. And Joan Crawford is basically just trying not to blink. And that's the idea of being somebody who's under a trance, is that she doesn't blink. She's doing very well, I must say. I mean, that's kind of amazing.
They're not going to send you back there with no one to take care of you.
I don't know how she did it.
Sydney in a couple of weeks.
You should try this at home. Back up the DVD. Ah, there okay. So she does close her eyes there, but I mean, back it up. Back up the Blu-ray, and just try to keep your eyes open for as long as she does. I think that she wins. But anyway, it's without much visual nuance, but you would hope, well, then there'll be some nuances in the acting, that the acting will be so incredibly riveting. But basically, the way Joan Crawford is playing it is playing it as kind of a zombie.
It doesn't make any difference whether I was innocent or guilty of what they framed me for. He says it's the only way.
This may just be something, innate. Sometimes it's not a matter of acting. Sometimes it's just a matter of essence. And some people are just better able to convince you that they're cracking up. Or some people may be closer to cracking up. And so when they play that on screen, they act it on the stage, it's really compelling because they're going to a place that's pretty close. I don't believe for 1 minute that Joan Crawford is anywhere near cracking up. I mean, it just doesn't. She's working, but you feel the work. By the way, you see these Americans there. Did it ever cross your mind, what are Americans doing there? Why is there like military bases? And this seems to be coming from a place in American history where America was beginning to really assert itself in the Pacific. there'd be a war over this in about 20 years, or about 9 years after this movie.
Don't you see, Sadie? You ain't yourself.
And now we have a shot of Sadie with her head like on just down, and above her is William Gargan. And this is kind of graceful because you can see her face and you can see him. The only problem here is that this plays a bit like a bad acting contest. You have Crawford, just trying to keep her eyes open and look like she's possessed basically by the devil, which is kind of what she is. And then you have William Gargan trying to sound like he's crying, even though he's not.
Can't bother us. Just you and me. Like Lefty and Maggie. 50-50. You'll be Mrs. Tim O'Hara. It's Sidney and us. The whole works against the penitentiary. And I'm taking you whether you want to go or not.
No, you mustn't. You mustn't.
And here comes Davidson.
I'm saved, I tell you. You'll send me to hell. Mr. Davidson.
Something really needs... Oh, here he is.
All evening I had a peculiar feeling you were in danger.
Sadie, don't pay any attention.
Something really needed to be laid in early into this performance, that she would be so absolutely vulnerable to this line of attack.
That's my lookout. What kind of a man are you anyway, picking on this poor kid here? Getting her so she's half crazy. Sending her so she'll have to go back to prison. You're one choice specimen, Davidson, I'll say that for you. They don't make your kind every day.
You are a reckless, headstrong man, O'Hara. You are breaking barracks and attempting a high-handed crime. You defy the authority of state and God. You cannot go on the way you are going, and I shall see to it that you do not.
Begging your pardon, might I ask what you think you're going to do about it?
Get back to your barracks as fast as you can and report here to me tomorrow after Miss Thompson is gone.
Where do you get these ideas, anyway? If it's good advice you want to ladle out, keep it. On such rare moments as I think for myself.
Oh, this is not helping your case. Watch what you say.
I'm here to watch out that Sadie don't make any fool breaks. You got to do some settling with me before she does any sailing.
You're wrong. I know what I'm doing. I'm sorry, but I see clear.
See clear? Why, he's got you so it's like you don't.
Here we go again with the
What's happened to me,
big-eyed. Nice thing. I mean, Crawford was very aware of the fact that she had very nice eyes, so she's making sure that she never blinks so that you always see them. But it's
The only thing I can't see.
it's pretty much one note for this whole scene, and it's a scene that really needs to land.
Yes.
What do you want me to do?
I don't want you to do anything.
That's probably Crawford's best line reading in the scene. I don't want you to do anything.
All right. I'll tell the boys to bring your things back.
And the reason why I think it's a good line reading is that she seems to be thinking. It seems to be something that slips out of her mouth rather than just planned.
I want to say this. I'll never forget you. Ever.
By the way, earlier, she mentions to him that she has to go to jail even though she didn't do anything. I think that's an important thing to have her tell him, because when she's talking to Davidson, we don't know if she's lying or not, or at least earlier in the movie. But now we know that she really is framed. And so Davidson is nuts. I mean, Davidson wants her to, actually, he thinks that it's the right thing for her to go to jail for something she didn't do. And now they're together. And he's happy.
Oh, my poor child, it is not your fault. In the last few days, you have become very close and dear to God.
He says you become very close, dear to God. In other words, to him. I mean, if God loves you, right? It's not like all of a sudden he likes you a little more than he used to. So to become closer and more dear to God, he's God in this equation.
Cleansed, glorified as the rain of heaven.
When you're here, everything's clear. Everything's all right. But when you're away, I'm afraid. I get to thinking of how wicked I used to be. And I just can't believe it's all forgiven. The days aren't so bad, but it's the nights.
Then I began to think and wonder if they're bad now. What are they going to be like when you can't come to me anymore, when I'm alone?
When you are alone, my strength...
His strength is going to come to her from prayer. It makes no sense at all theologically.
Little by little, you yourself will grow stronger, surer, and presently the time will come when sin and terror will be powerless to penetrate the great love that God has wrapped around you. Then will you be redeemed. The kingdom and the glory will be yours.
Yes. Yes. When you talk like that, I'm not afraid. That old life I led don't belong to me at all. It wasn't me. It was someone else. When I feel like that, Mr. Davidson, does it mean I'm redeemed?
Yes, Sadie. Tomorrow will be a very...
This scene almost seems as though it wants to be combined with the scene that is to follow. And I think that the reason why it seems that way is because not enough was done to differentiate this scene in dramatic terms. Because essentially the next scene is going to be another two-person scene between Davidson and Sadie.
Hello, Horn. You still up?
Yep, reading. Want anything?
No, I'm off to bed. There's an uncanny concentration about the rain tonight.
Perhaps. Everybody in?
Davidson's still out. Can't sleep.
Can't sleep, eh?
Has uneasy dreams, his wife tells me.
He has uneasy dreams. Davidson has uneasy dreams, and it's supposed to be he's having dreams of the hills of somewhere in the Midwest. It is in the story, and the doctor observes that the hills in the Midwest are kind of like women's breasts. So it's suggested that he's having kind of erotic dreams or something. That kind of erotic thoughts are keeping Davidson up. And so from this little interlude, which ends with the Thus spake Zarathustra references, we then get the scene which easily could have happened as part of the same scene before, or actually this scene should be different than should be differentiated. All right, now we go. This is Davidson's big scene.
Mr. Davidson,
Oh, Miss Thompson, what are you up for?
I couldn't sleep. This rain and those drums. And then thinking about tomorrow. I don't seem to be able to do much for myself, do I?
Not yet, maybe, but every prayer is going to make you stronger.
This time tomorrow, I'll be on the sea. I don't suppose we'll ever meet again.
Not in this life, Sadie, probably.
I'll be in prison 3 years. That's a long time. What'll I do when I come out? What'll I be? For hours and hours I've been wondering.
Out there in the rain, I walked and wondered too. The darkness was full of eyes. I saw things I never saw before. I looked into the awful groves of Astra herself. Sadie, you don't have to go back to San Francisco.
What do you mean?
Just that.
Didn't you tell me I had to make a sacrifice?
Yes, but I repeat, you don't have to go back unless you truly want to.
But I do want to. I haven't got anything else to offer. It's the only thing I've got to give, and I want to give it.
I thank thee. I thank thee.
Why do you say that, Mr. Davis?
Because you said...
Okay, so we see here that Houston is choosing to play it a little bit more emotional, just a little bit more than before.
Lay as a thank offering at your Redeemer's feet that even if I offered to let you go, you would refuse.
I hope I'll be strong enough to go through with it right.
From now on, you will be strong. There's to be no more fear. Radiant, beautiful. You'll be one of the daughters of the king. That's what you are now, Sadie. One of the daughters of the king.
All right, so all of a sudden, he starts talking about how she's one of the daughters of the king, and this is it. And now, what's happening to him? Take a look at him. This is what's hard about drama as opposed to stories, because you can make a virtue in a story about what you leave out. But in the drama, sometimes if you're depicting major transitions that have to be shown. This is him now getting overcome with lust at the idea of the daughter of the king or something. And the drums, of course, are getting through to him because that's a big thing in Hollywood movies at the time. He's praying for strength. And then it doesn't quite work because he's beginning to look a little bit like Lon Chaney, that is Lon Chaney Sr. He's turning a little bit like, getting a little like Frederick March and Dr. Jekyll. I suppose that had to be enough for audiences in 1932. One does wonder how it was done on the stage, but I know. I don't entirely buy it. But now, the sun is shining. It was raining horribly, and now the sun is shining, and one wonders why. And of course, we're going to find out why the sun is shining very soon. It's because Davidson is dead. And we have all these people who are kind of in touch with life and nature. And the weird guy who wants to deny life is suddenly, ooh, there he is. There's his rolled up socks. This is filmed on and off of Catalina Island. And the studio, some of it too, of course.
Davidson. He isn't dead, is he? Throat's cut. Been dead for several hours. Suicide. I must tell Mrs. Davidson. No, I'll go back and tell her.
So it's understood that Davidson was a suicide. I've heard some people say, oh, no, Sadie really killed him. But that's ridiculous. There's no way she could, especially in the way he killed him. He cut his throat from ear to ear. Yeah, they make it explicit in the movie just because people sometimes misinterpreted the story. Now, what happens in the short story is that I'm not sure which character it is, but it may be the doctor. But it goes to Sadie, And she just says, look, all men are pigs, pigs. And that's when the doctor realizes, and you don't know what he realized, but you infer that he realized that some kind of sexual assault was done to Sadie. At this point, as in the play and as in the story, Sadie has no idea that Davidson is dead, but whatever happened between her and Davidson has brought about this retransformation into her old self.
One of us ought to go in and tell her what's happened.
She hasn't touched that thing since Davidson went after her. What's she playing it now for?
I don't know.
Look here. Last night she was frightened and all in about going back to San Francisco. Why is she playing that thing the first thing this morning when at noon she's going on a journey she's afraid to make? Why?
How should I know?
What do you infer?
I'm not in Florida.
Who's going to tell her? You?
It'll come better from you.
Oh, all right. Miss Thompson,
Yeah? What is it?
let me in. It's Horn.
Oh, no, you don't. Stay where you are. Be out in a minute.
It's very important, Miss Thompson.
Okay, coming right up.
And there we go. Repeated that same thing. One hand, one shoe. And there she is.
Hello, Horn. What's going on? Hello, handsome. What are you doing up so early?
Sadie.
Surprised to see me all dolled up, huh? Well, why not? I had to put on my best.
So as far as she's concerned, what's about to happen to her is that she's going to jail. And she's not saved anymore. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds.
I'd race you down to the beach if it wasn't for these pesky heels.
Sadie, turn off that phonograph.
Why?
They'll be back any minute.
Who?
Mrs. Davidson.
And why should I turn off the phone?
See where she says, and why should I turn off? This is where Crawford lives. This is that kind of confrontational, sardonic, that quality. That's Crawford. That's her natural terrain, her natural habitat.
That phonograph stays on.
Sadie, something has happened.
You bet something's happened. You men. Pigs.
Sadie, Davidson's killed himself.
What?
They found him up.
And the music is laughing at Davidson having killed himself.
Killed himself. Then I can forgive him.
So Davidson did something. She can forgive him.
But I see it wasn't. Joe, please. No offense to you and that last crack I made, handsome.
Oh, that's all right.
I'm going to Sydney with you, if the invitation still holds good.
Now he's happy, but she thinks that's it. He doesn't want her to go. It's over. And there we go. Another prostitute movie with a happy ending, because they all are.
I understand, Miss Thompson. I'm sorry for him, and I'm sorry for you.
It's an interesting curtain line for Mrs. Davidson, because how does she know what made her husband kill himself? What does she know about his feelings about Sadie? Because they've been so completely opaque to us. In any case, that is the end of our talk about Rain, and it's a very interesting movie, very much of its time. I'm Mick LaSalle.